Before coins as we know them existed, ancient Ireland had a thriving, complex economy. This wasn't a world of simple bartering, but a sophisticated system based on the value of cattle and other goods. A cow, for instance, was a standard unit of wealth. Laws from this period, known as the Brecon Laws, meticulously detailed the value of everything, from land and tools to fines for breaking the law, all measured in livestock. But alongside this system, another form of precious currency was emerging. The Celts, with their incredible artistic skills and extensive trade networks across Europe, began to use gold. They didn't mint coins in the modern sense, but created beautiful objects that served a similar purpose. These early Irish treasures were stunning. We found incredible gold rings, often called ring money, which could be worn as jewelry but also used for trade. Archaeologists have unearthed hoards of these items, suggesting they were a way of storing and displaying immense wealth. These weren't crude lumps of metal, they were exquisitely crafted pieces, often with intricate spiral and geometric designs that are instantly recognizable as Celtic art. This shows that even in its earliest forms, Irish currency was about more than just value. It was about beauty, status, and cultural identity. These items were a tangible link to the powerful chieftains and skilled artisans of pre-Christian Ireland. The influence of the wider world was also felt, as Celtic tribes in Gaul, which is modern-day France, began to mint their own coins inspired by the gold staters of Philip II of Macedon. These ideas filtered across the sea. Some of these Celtic gold staters have been found in Ireland, likely brought over through trade or by warriors who had fought as mercenaries on the continent. While the Irish didn't adopt the practice of minting their own coins at this stage, they clearly understood the concept of a standardized piece of precious metal representing a fixed value. It was a crucial step on the long journey towards a formal coinage system. This period represents the very foundation of Irish economic history. It was a time of dual systems, the practical agricultural wealth represented by cattle, and the prestigious portable wealth of gold. The incredible craftsmanship of the gold ring money and the presence of foreign coins show an island that was connected, sophisticated, and developing its own unique relationship with money. It was a world teetering on the edge of a great change, a change that would be brought not by trade, but by the arrival of fearsome warriors in their iconic longships, who would finally introduce the first true coins to Irish soil. The arrival of the Vikings in the late 8th century was a seismic event for Ireland. They came first as raiders, but soon they became settlers, traders, and founders of Ireland's first great towns, including Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick. With them, they brought their own economic customs, which were heavily based on silver. They were part of a vast trading network that stretched from Scandinavia to the Middle East, and they were accustomed to using coins. It was this Viking influence that finally led to the minting of the very first coins in Ireland, an incredible moment in the nation's history. It all began in Dublin, their most powerful stronghold. Around the year 997, the Viking king of Dublin, Sitric Silkbeard, issued the first ever Irish coins. This was a monumental step. These coins were not original designs but were direct copies of the pennies being minted in England by King Ethelred II. This makes perfect sense. The Vikings in Dublin had extensive trade links with the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms across the Irish Sea, so using a familiar design made commerce much easier. These early coins, now known as Hiberno-Norse pennies, featured a crude portrait of the king on one side and a symbol of a long cross on the other. They were made of silver, the preferred metal of the Viking world. For over a century, the Dublin Mint was the only source of coinage on the island. The production was not always consistent, and the quality of the silver and the clarity of the designs varied over time. Early issues were of good silver and were reasonably well struck, but as the decades passed, the coins often became lighter, the silver content was reduced, and the designs became more abstract and stylized. Instead of a clear portrait, you might see a series of lines and pellets that only vaguely resembled a human head. This shows that the coins were being produced primarily for local use within the bustling Viking towns. The legacy of these Hiberno-Norse coins is immense. They mark the transition from a barter and precious metal economy to a true monetary system. They are the physical embodiment of the Viking impact on Ireland, transforming it from a purely rural society into one with powerful urban trading hubs. Finding one of these small silver pennies today is like holding a direct link to that turbulent and transformative period. They tell a story of trade, power, and the birth of a new kind of Irish identity, one forged in the fire of Viking settlement and commerce. They paved the way for every Irish coin that would follow. The Norman invasion of 1169 changed Ireland forever, and its coinage was no exception. When the Norman lords and later the English kings established their authority, they brought their own monetary system with them. King John, even before he was king, was declared Lord of Ireland and issued the first Anglo-Irish coins around 1185. These new coins were distinct from the earlier Hiberno-Norse issues. They featured the ruler's head enclosed within a triangle on one side and a sun, moon, and stars motif on the other. This was a clear statement of power, a way of stamping royal authority onto the very fabric of Irish commerce. Throughout the medieval period, mints were established not just in Dublin, but also in other important Norman towns like Waterford, Cork, and Limerick. This shows how the English crown's control was spreading across the island. The coins, typically silver pennies, farthings, and halfpennies, were essential for paying soldiers, collecting taxes, and facilitating trade within the growing colonial settlements. A fascinating feature of these coins is the use of the monarch's name. Coins of King John, Henry III, and the Edwards all circulated, each bearing the name of the reigning English king, but often with designs that were unique to Ireland, like the distinctive triangle. It was during the Tudor period that one of Ireland's most enduring national symbols first appeared on its coinage, the harp. In 1534, King Henry VIII, having broken with the Pope in Rome, declared himself King of Ireland, replacing the previous title of Lord of Ireland. To mark this new status, he issued a new coin called a groat. On one side was the royal shield of England, but on the other was a beautiful and unmistakable image of a harp. This was a powerful choice. The harp was already a potent symbol of Gaelic Ireland, and by placing it on his coinage, Henry was symbolically claiming the whole island for himself. From that moment on, the harp became a near-constant feature of Irish coinage, a symbol that has survived through centuries of turmoil, rebellion, and political change. During the reign of Elizabeth I, coins were produced with lower silver content specifically for Ireland, a controversial policy that caused economic hardship. The Stuart kings who followed continued the tradition, minting coins that featured the harp, cementing its place as the definitive emblem of Irish money. This period laid the groundwork for a distinct numismatic identity, one that balanced the authority of the English crown with the enduring cultural symbol of the Irish nation. Times of war and rebellion often lead to fascinating and unusual types of money, and 17th century Ireland is a prime example. The chaos of the 1640s with the Irish Confederate Wars raging saw the creation of money of necessity. One of the most famous examples is the Ormonde money, issued between 1643 and 1644 by the Earl of Ormonde, who was leading the royalist forces loyal to King Charles I. With supplies of silver and gold cut off, he took the extraordinary step of ordering silver plate, dishes, cups, and other household silver to be collected, melted down, and struck into crude emergency coins. These pieces were simply stamped with CR, for Charles Rex and their value. However, the most famous emergency coinage in Irish history is undoubtedly gun money. This was issued by the Catholic King James II during his campaign in Ireland between 1689 and 1690 as he fought to reclaim his throne from William of Orange. James was desperately short of funds and precious metals. His ingenious, if ultimately flawed, solution was to create money from whatever base metal he could find. Cannons, church bells, kitchen pots, and any other available bronze or brass were melted down to produce shillings, sixpences, and half-crowns. This is why it's famously known as gun money. These coins were remarkable for several reasons. Firstly, they carried a promise. James II pledged that when he won the war and regained his kingdom, he would redeem these base metal tokens for proper silver and gold coins. To make this possible, each coin was stamped not just with its value, but also with the month of issue. This was so that holders would receive interest for the time they held the coin. This level of detail on an emergency currency was unprecedented. It was a desperate gamble to maintain public confidence in a currency that had no intrinsic value. Of course, James II lost the war at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. His gun money instantly became worthless, a source of financial ruin for his loyal supporters who had accepted it as payment. Today, these coins are powerful historical artifacts. They tell a story of desperation, innovation, and the high stakes of the Williamite War. Another fascinating but short-lived issue from this period was Wood's Hibernia coinage in the 1720s. A private English merchant, William Wood, was granted a patent to produce copper coins for Ireland. The Irish Parliament, however, was furious at not being consulted, and the writer Jonathan Swift led a massive public campaign against the coins, which were eventually withdrawn. The Act of Union in 1800 was, really a turning point in Irish history, both politically and economically. It formally abolished the Irish Parliament in Dublin and created the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. For the first 2 decades after that, Ireland actually maintained a separate currency system, with its own Irish pennies and pounds, though, they were closely linked to British sterling. However, the final step in monetary union came in 1826, when a new law was passed that completely assimilated the Irish currency into that of Great Britain. From this point on, the Irish pound ceased to exist, and British coins became the official legal tender across the island. For the next 100 years or so, the coins that jingled in Irish pockets were identical to those used in London, Cardiff, or Edinburgh. The pennies, shillings and florins all featured the portrait of the reigning British monarch, from George IV through the long reign of Queen Victoria, and into the 20th century with Edward VII and George V. The iconic harp symbol, which had defined Irish coinage for centuries, it vanished from circulation. For a population increasingly driven by nationalist aspirations, being forced to use coins bearing the face of a British king or queen was a constant, tangible reminder of their country's political status. This period was not without its own monetary challenges either. The Great Famine of the 1840s caused unimaginable devastation, and the role of money, and really the lack of it, was central to the tragedy. While the currency itself was stable, the economic policies of the British government created a situation where people starved while food was being exported. The coins of Queen Victoria, used during this bleak time, are therefore imbued with a profound and sorrowful historical significance. They represent an era of immense suffering and demographic collapse, all under the legal and monetary framework of the United Kingdom. The use of British coinage continued right up until the struggle for independence in the early 20th century. The coins from this era tell the story of a changing Britain and, by extension, a changing Ireland. The grand portraits of Victoria gave way to the bearded profiles of her successors. The materials and designs evolved with the times, but for many in Ireland, these coins were a symbol of a union they wished to end. The desire for political independence was inextricably linked with the desire for a return to a distinctly Irish currency, one that would reflect the sovereignty of a new state and bring the beloved harp back to the nation's money. The birth of the Irish Free State in 1922 was a moment of immense national pride and transformation. One of the most important tasks for the new government was to establish its own, distinctly Irish currency. This was, a powerful symbol of sovereignty. In 1926, the Coinage Act was passed, setting the stage for the creation of Ireland's first modern coins. The government decided against putting portraits of political leaders on the coins, perhaps to avoid controversy in a state just emerging from a bitter civil war. Instead, they opted for a design competition to find a theme that would unite the nation. A special committee was formed, chaired by the famous poet W.B. Yeats. They decided that the coins should feature a series of animals that were important to Ireland's agricultural economy and rural life. This was a brilliant and inspired choice, connecting the new currency directly to the heart of the country's identity. The harp, the ancient symbol of the nation, was to be placed on the obverse or head side of every coin, while the animals would feature on the reverse or tail side. An international competition was held, and the winning designs were submitted by an English artist, Percy Metcalfe. Metcalfe's designs were beautiful, modern, and elegant. They perfectly captured the spirit of the new state. The farthing featured a woodcock, the halfpenny a pig with piglets, and the penny a hen with her chicks. The larger coins were just as impressive. The 3p had a hare, the 6p a wolfhound, and the shilling a magnificent bull. The florin, or 2 shillings, depicted a salmon, a creature from Irish mythology representing wisdom, and the half-crown showed a graceful horse. These coins, first issued in 1928, were an immediate success. They were affectionately known as the Barnyard Set, and were beloved by the Irish people. These coins were a radical departure from the royal portraits of the British era. they were a statement of a new beginning, reflecting a peaceful, agricultural, and distinctly Irish identity. The choice of animals connected the modern state to its ancient past and its rural present. The coins were initially minted in London by the Royal Mint, but they were proudly Irish in every other way. From 1938, the inscription on the coins was changed from Saoirstát Éireann, or Irish Free State, to simply Éire, meaning Ireland, reflecting the country's new constitution. These beautiful animal designs would remain a feature of Irish life for over 70 years. The story of Irish coins is also, well, a story of the metals they were made from. The materials used for coinage have always been a reflection of a country's wealth, its technological capabilities, and the economic realities of the time. The earliest Celtic ring money was crafted from gold, a metal reserved for the highest echelons of society, demonstrating immense prestige. The first true coins, the Hiberno-Norse pennies, were made of silver, the standard for trade in the Viking world. This reliance on precious metals like gold and silver would continue for centuries, as the intrinsic value of the metal was directly linked to the coin's face value. It was money you could trust. During the medieval and early modern periods, silver remained the dominant metal for most Irish coinage. However, as we have seen, the quality of this silver could vary dramatically. English monarchs sometimes issued coins for Ireland with a lower silver content than their English counterparts. This was known as debasement, and it was effectively a hidden tax, causing inflation and economic hardship for the Irish people. Copper was also introduced for smaller value coins like farthings and halfpennies, as it was a cheaper and more practical material for everyday transactions. This hierarchy of metals, gold for the highest values, silver for the middle, and copper for the lowest, was standard across Europe. The 20th century brought significant changes to the composition of Irish coins. When the Irish Free State introduced its new coinage in 1928, the shilling, florin, and half-crown were made from 75% silver. The smaller denominations, like the penny and halfpenny, were bronze, while the threepence and sixpence were made of pure nickel. However, the rising price of silver after World War II made it too expensive to use in circulating coins. In 1950, Ireland, like many other countries, replaced its silver coins with versions made from cupronickel, an alloy of copper and nickel that had a similar silvery appearance but no precious metal content. This shift away from precious metals was completed with the move to decimalisation in 1971. The new decimal coins were made from practical, modern alloys. The halfpenny, 1 penny, and 2 penny coins were bronze, while the 5 penny and 10 penny were cupronickel. A new, larger 50 penny coin was also introduced, also made of cupronickel. These materials were chosen for their durability, cost-effectiveness, and ease of minting. The journey from the chieftain's gold ring to the modern cupronickel alloy charts the evolution of currency itself, from a store of precious wealth to a practical token of state-guaranteed value. For much of its history, Ireland did not have a permanent state-run mint of its own. The power to create coins was often held by the ruling authority, and for centuries, that authority was based in England. The very first Hiberno-Norse coins were struck in Dublin, in a mint established by the Viking kings. After the Norman invasion, temporary mints were set up in various towns under royal control, such as Waterford and Limerick, but Dublin remained the primary center for Anglo-Irish coinage production. These mints were often established to meet specific needs like paying an army, and could be closed down just as quickly. For hundreds of years, the production of Irish coins was outsourced. The coins of the Tudors and Stuarts, bearing the iconic harp, were largely struck at the Tower of London or the New Royal Mint at Tower Hill. Even when the Irish Free State commissioned its beautiful new animal-themed coins in 1928, it did not yet have the facilities to produce them. The contract for minting the new currency was awarded to the Royal Mint in London. For 50 years, from 1928 to 1978, every single Irish coin, from the farthing to the half-crown, and later the decimal pence, was produced in Britain and then shipped over to Ireland for circulation. This situation began to change in the 1970s. As Ireland's economy grew and the nation asserted its modern identity, the desire for a domestic mint became a priority. The Central Bank of Ireland took on the project, and in 1976, a brand new state-of-the-art facility was opened in Sandyford, a suburb of Dublin. This was honestly a hugely significant moment. The new mint was called the Currency Centre, and for the first time in the modern era, Ireland could produce its own money on its own soil. The first coins to be struck at Sandyford were the 1978 issue, marking a final step in Ireland's journey to full monetary independence. The Irish Mint at Sandyford went on to produce all of Ireland's coins for the remainder of the 20th century. It handled the production of the new 20-penny coin in 1986 and the £1 coin in 1990. The facility was a symbol of national pride and technological self-sufficiency. When the time came to transition to the euro, the Irish Mint played a crucial role, striking hundreds of millions of new euro coins bearing the Irish harp design. The journey from relying on temporary medieval workshops and the Royal Mint in London to possessing a modern world-class currency centre in Dublin perfectly mirrors Ireland's own path to becoming a confident and sovereign European nation. The 20th century saw two final massive transformations in Irish currency. The first was decimalisation. For centuries, Ireland, like Britain, had used the complex pounds, shillings, and pence system, what folks called the pound SD system. In this system, there were 12 pence in a shilling and 20 shillings in a pound. It was a system that required, well, complex mental arithmetic for even simple transactions. In the 1960s, a decision was made to modernize and switch to a simpler decimal system where the pound would be divided into 100 new pence. The day chosen for the changeover was 15th February 1971, which became known as Decimal Day. The transition was a huge national undertaking. New coins had already been introduced in the years leading up to 1971. The new 5-penny and 10-penny coins were the same size and value as the old 1 shilling and 2 shilling or florin coins, which helped people get used to them. On Decimal Day itself, new bronze halfpenny, 1-penny and 2-penny coins were released. Percy Metcalfe's beloved animal designs were retired, and the new decimal coins featured ornamental bird designs inspired by ancient Celtic manuscripts, created by the artist Gabriel Hayes. The harp, of course, remained in its place of honor. It was the end of an era for the familiar pennies and shillings, but the start of a simpler, more modern monetary age. The second and even bigger change came at the turn of the millennium. As a committed member of the European Union, Ireland decided to join the single European currency project. This meant saying goodbye to the Irish pound, or punt, altogether. On 1 January 1999, the euro became Ireland's official currency for electronic transactions, and on 1 January 2002, euro notes and coins were introduced into circulation. The national cash changeover was a massive logistical operation, but it was remarkably smooth. For a short period, both the Irish pound and the euro were accepted in shops, before the old currency was finally withdrawn in February 2002. The arrival of the euro marked the end of a distinct Irish coinage that had begun with Citric Silkbeard over 1,000 years earlier. However, a crucial part of the tradition was preserved. Under the euro system, each member state can design its own national side for the coins. Ireland chose a single, elegant design for all 8 of its euro coins, from the 1 cent to the 2 euro piece. They chose the harp. This meant that the symbol first placed on an Irish coin by Henry VIII in 1534, a symbol that had graced the money of the Free State and the Republic, would continue to circulate in the pockets of Irish people and now all across Europe. It was, honestly, a beautiful continuation of a long and fascinating story.